Alright guys, so let's talk about phobias, fears. Especially irrational ones, because those are always fun, right? Growing up, I've had a hell of a lot of phobias. It took me a while, but as I grew up, I overcame them. Wasn't the easiest thing to do. And I just remember the times that they were the worst was when I actually experienced panic attacks because of them. As a child, I was really, really fearful of pretty much everything. Think of it like a timid little cat or kitten. Oh my god, I was just terrified of everything that I could come across. Let me think of one. Anytime I wasn't with my parents, that might be a common one for a really young child. I remember my parents telling me I was pretty attached. Anytime I wasn't with them, I would I would pretty much cry or complain or something, but mostly out of fear. And then that sort of evolved to fear of the dark. And then here's an interesting one, because fear of the dark might be a common one. One of the more interesting fears I had, or a phobia I ended up developing, was fear of sleeping. Think about that. I don't know if anybody else has ever experienced anything like that, but I was legitimately afraid of going to sleep for a couple of years when I was a child. And I remember this. And part of the reason was because of nightmares. Now, that was one of the reasons. The other fear, it might be a little disturbing coming from a child. The other fear was of the consciousness just sort of stopping when you go to sleep. That really disturbed me as a child, and I thought about it a lot. Oh my god, do not get me started on that. And that sort of fear of going to sleep was pretty much just rooted in those two things, the loss of consciousness and nightmares. And when I was a child, I had a lot of them. Like I said, I was a really scared kid, and as a result, my dreams weren't always pleasant. A recurring one was, if you haven't ever seen the Halloween movies, well, the main serial killer, if you have seen them, the main serial killer, he terrified me. Just that pale face, that mask, oh man, with the dead neutral look, it disturbed me. And that kind of haunted me for a couple of years. I would always have dreams of that. And my parents tried their best, because I told them. They tried their best to comfort me. But in the end, it was all about just realizing and growing up and learning fiction from fact. Oh, and here's a little disturbing tale for you. One of my earliest memories, if I try to think back as far as I can, they start to break up. You know how they say you can only remember so far, and then it's just like you either made up the memories or you just can't remember anymore. It's just like either fuzz or you just can't go. There's a point where you can't remember anymore. So when I try to do that, there are a couple memories that come up. There's the one where I'm piggyback riding on someone's shoulders down in South America, and then I think I hit my head on on a swing set, like the pole on the top of a swing set. Then another memory I have is getting into a fight with my older cousin. Now, we were like 3 at the time. That's another really early memory that is a legitimate memory, that it's not something I made up. Now, here's one of the earliest legitimate memories that I know that I did not make up, and that's been following me around for years. Alright, so right now I think the way I see it, it's gotta be a dream. It's gotta be a recurring dream that I had as a child. And what it was, remember when I said earlier that I was afraid of not being with my parents, of being alone? I was really attached. That's where this comes in. So my fear of being detached from my parents culminates in this memory. So here's what I wrote from what I remember. For whatever reason, I am in the room by myself with the door closed. This is strange because I am usually accompanied by one of my parents. I look around the room. Now this is where the strange thing happens. the small head of a clown doll pops out of the area above and between the two closets. I have no idea why, but we begin to talk to each other. This experience happens several times, again and again, on an almost day-to-day basis. It becomes a regular thing. When I am in the room by myself, the clown appears in the exact same spot, just his head. There are several things I am not supposed to do. I am not supposed to tell my parents about him. I am not supposed to leave until we are done talking. There are other rules to follow, but I don't remember what they are. Since I have no reason to distrust him, I listen. I didn't exactly know that clown heads were not supposed to pop out of the wall. After several of these interactions with the clown, he disappears. He just stops showing up. Some time passes. We are still living in the same house. I am not sure why, but I end up going to my bedroom by myself again. My parents are downstairs. I close the door because I think I'm going to play, as far as I recall. As I close the door, I am facing the direction adjacent to the closets. I remember the clown. I wonder if he will appear again. I have not seen him in a long time. Hell, I can't even remember how he sounds like. The head of the clown pops out again above and between the closet doors. I see him and he says something to me. His voice is deep, demonic, and inhuman. I start to get scared. He says something along the lines of, "Don't yell for," and he says my dad's name. Now I panic. I run out of the room, down the upstairs hall, and around the banister of the stairs. I am getting ready to run downstairs to get my dad to help me. A long arm wearing an equally long white clown glove follows me as it stretches down the hall. It grabs me and pulls me back into the room. The memories really start to blur here. Something about my dad coming upstairs and talking to it, as if my dad were negotiating something so it would leave me alone. Now, I wrote a little bit of hindsight after this. For years after the dreams, I really did think they happened. I mean, as a child, you sort of don't distinguish between dreams and reality as easily as it did, as easily as you do in real life. I mean, at least I didn't. And that sort of culminated into a fear. I would be afraid to be in a room by myself and to be away from my parents because I thought this thing would appear. And these are a few of the earliest memories I have. There's really no way I can distinguish, no clear way of distinguishing reality from these dreams because the way they're embedded in my head are as if they really did happen. I've talked to my parents about it and I've never mentioned the clown to them. My brother, however, I did mention it to him and he knows about it. Even when I was young, I did mention it to him, and it is what it is, a recurring dream. So that's, as you can see, with the childhood full of irrational fears and things like that, I honestly did have a lot of phobias, and a lot of these gave me panic attacks. I remember I had even a fear of the wind. Think about that. I mean, it's irrational, and I had it for about a year as a child, going to the park. I remember the first panic attack I had because of that. A thunderstorm was just culminating, and we were just playing, out in the open field, and I see the dark clouds. I feel a sudden coolness as the fronts, I guess. I'm not a meteorologist, but as the front sort of changes and as the storm approaches. And that sort of developed into a fear of the wind, and I would have panic attacks whenever the wind blew roughly. And nowadays, I'm over that. My dad helped me with that, and the poor guy, he had to deal with a lot of my phobias. Now I can just literally I have fun with it. Whenever there's a strong wind, I enjoy it. I just feel the rush, and I think it's awesome. In high school, interaction phobia, I had it really bad. I mean, as a teen, I feel like many probably consider themselves awkward. I definitely was. but it culminated to a point where I was literally just afraid to talk to anyone. And I'll tell this story in another video, but I chose the probably the worst high school to go to with such fears. I chose to go to a performing arts high school. And well, in doing so, I had to sort of face all those phobias and all those irrational fears. I think another natural phobia I had was fear of planes. I still kind of have this, but it's not as bad. I remember the first time I remember going on a plane. The first time I went on a plane, I was a toddler. The first time I remember going on a plane, I remember I had a panic attack just as we ascended into the sky. Now, I pretty much have none of these fears, except for maybe the planes, but it's just an interesting concept. I think that overcoming them is certainly possible. I'm not sure about things like disorders or things where there's probably a legitimate reason for why one is suffering. But as for me, they were completely irrational. And going from this timid kid to at least where I am now, I think they're definitely overcome a bowl, if that's a word. All right, you can definitely overcome them. Anyway, I just wanted to share that because I've been on a serious roller coaster ride with these fears, and I think they're really fascinating. I mean, the experiences. So I hope you enjoy that. Anyway, those were my fears, and now I don't have them anymore.